All right, family. It's once again great to build and connect with everyone. I know you wanted to get your wholeness in, but I know you was in there in the beginning like, should I? Even though your camera was off and everything, like we was really going to see you, we definitely welcome you into the space. We're going to hit the ground running on this today. Runtime is about 30 minutes. Meaning that we're going to definitely see if we can get everybody out of here on Friday night in at least an hour and a half, but we'll see how that goes. I see lots of doubt in certain faces, even some disappointment even, but however, I definitely want to make sure that we come in the space tonight and really do this thing together. Now, you could have been anywhere because it is for sure Friday, and I know even though there's a lot going on in out in the world where you can't move around as much, generally we find something to do, but you chose to be here tonight amongst tribe, and we give thanks for that. I do want to take a moment, right off to really just touch and connect. And for those that are here and just joining us today, this is the universal symbol for everlasting life. This is a time and an opportunity for us to be able to receive everything that we prefer. This means that inside of your mind, you know what you want. In your consciousness, you know what you want, and you can receive it here abundantly. What you're looking at, as you heard, there's folks all around the world, all tribe members here. This gives us a complete spectrum. And when you achieve the complete spectrum, this means that there's perpetual energy here, so there is no exhaustion. This is a wellspring. So you can always come back to any of these points from time to time in infinity and enrich yourself. So if you're ever getting beat up in the corner, you feel emotionally depressed and you just need a moment, you say, man, I just need some love, I need some passion. Remember this. And not only is this one open, there's also quite a few more we never fail to mention. And this is just a time and an opportunity where we recognize who we truly are in this space of infinity and the uniqueness and the special times that we're in to be here together. With that being said, we also coming here with something every single week, and it all depends. That's what I love about Tribe Vibe so much, is that it's really the vibe of the tribe and what we're doing with the co-creative force. And I feel like that what I've had the opportunity to do is just to allow myself to be free flowing in the full spectrum and able to transmit the message of the collective. I wanted to take a moment also just to center into the space, because I know many of us are coming from other things. We may have engaged in a few events before we arrived here. Maybe you were stuck in traffic. Maybe you were cooking. And I just wanted to center us into the space and let us all come to the awareness that we are here with each other. We're also here with the ancestors, lots of massive knowledge and wisdom, lots of love. The divine feminine and masculine have all arrived in the space, and this is where the cosmos has us at this moment. And just to bask in that is beautiful. Seldom do we find that there's an opportunity to actually receive and to grow and to expand these days. There's always a fear or contraction or something like that happening, but this is not the space for that. This is the place that you can grow from within. We believe in balance, so it's not always about just getting to the higher level. It's about really expanding from within. And also you have your brothers and sisters here who are also here with you on the journey. And that means a lot, because if you know who you are, then you'll know who everybody else is around you, because this is all about resonance. So since the tribe is functioning on resonance, this also means that when something does come into the space and it starts to agitate, like something underneath the skin, it's eventually removed. So just us holding space. That's why we have pillars here. It does all of the work and the fun, if you may. This also means that holding space is equally as important. There are many of us on this line now that are not saying anything. I also have my brother Andrew in the studio today, so he's holding his space up and bringing that fire in, so that's awesome. And there are many of us also just around the world doing our thing and tapping into this moment in the meditations and in the dreams to make sure that our stream is strong, is stable, and we're on broadband. I want to say all that, and then the electricity come out. That was a perfect time, right? Like, oh, 70's not in. I told you, the universe showed us. But we're also here. We're unapologetic. What this means is we're definitely not here trying to judge each other and figure out who each other is. Like I said, how your hair is and what you got going on. This is just about that universal love. And today we're actually going to really get into this from a very interesting way, because something came across and I was like, wow, yeah, I would love to dive into that. And it holds dear to my heart also. It's about eniology. I was obviously beefing out a lot of the resonant sections inside of eniology. As I mentioned, I had to do that final pass of adding some of the correspondences that I had on hand. And I did also notice that we were a little thin on Rahu and Ketu correspondences. I know maybe y'all 4 and 7 saw that. It's like, whoa, it's a little thin over here, though. It seems like this area didn't get the upgrade. And it is for sure because Rahu and Ketu are some of the most mystical signs inside of the eniology, or inside the Jyotish numerology, or inside the Ennead. As you know, this system is universal. But it's also very interesting why, and I for sure got to the bottom and the top of it, me myself being a number 4. But I also really want us to see today not ourselves as a specific archetype or lensing through a specific archetype, but actually to understand even how to grasp eniology's complete use on the consciousness. Not as just you out on a specific path, but you as all the paths, and the paths themselves holding a deep mystery. This is very important, because when you hear what I'm even going to present today, you can take it for face value, and it tells one story. Mary had a little lamb. For kids, they're going to see that like a little lamb and a little girl. Then there's going to be those who have that exoteric approach at seeing things. And they're going to be like, okay, she had a baby and he was pure and nice. That's that exoteric, right? And then for those that'll go a little bit deeper, they're going to synchronize that the divine feminine push forth from the womb a light. Right. So it's going to just keep getting deeper and deeper based on where you're coming from. But remember, the surface it's just a little girl and it's just a lamb. So we can have a tendency to do that with a lot of this ancient knowledge, because in itself, it's not intentionally encrypted. A lot of times people think, well, they're trying to keep us from the mysteries. It's not that. It's just you speak a totally different language. You're in a totally different time. And a lot of the things that were like the puns and how everybody talked then, and that's how they wrote things down, is not exactly how we communicate now. And that can, of course, produce quite a few things. So we love to just clear things up. And I felt like since we're completing a lot of our eniology material, that it was important to have at least something on wax that really went into Rahu and Ketu the way we do it. Because, you know, there's obviously a lot of folks bringing the knowledge. I love to do it in the 2020 way, in the expression, in the language that we speak as tribe. And so how this really started is that I came out of like just my sleep thinking I had figured it all out. This happens from time to time. I got it. And then I realized it was something that I already knew. And I just needed to kind of bake on it a little bit longer. And what this is that, of course, as we spoke on, that the masculine part of us is the mind, and the feminine part of us is the womb. And we've discussed this. So if you're not aware of it, everyone here has a masculine and a feminine side, just as sure as you have a positive and you have a negative. See, I may have some instability on my internet connection, so I hope that works out tonight. So you have this positive and you have this negative. We know we even have a neutral, but that's the same thing when we say masculine and feminine. So when I'm saying masculine and feminine, that doesn't mean just you as the woman or just you as the man. We're talking about something even beyond all of that. And that these forces, now, if you could think of the entire experience you're in, and this is why this will ring home tonight, because this is just what you're going through, what you're experiencing. I'm just going to put it right in front of you one more time. Now, if you notice that our entire experience is really designed to give us feedback, like we create things for feedback. And it seems like that the feedback even allows us to confirm who we are. So what I mean by this is that even if you have a job, if you're an artisan, if you're studying something, generally you're going to that's going to birth something, and then you're going to be edified by the feedback. I just want to make sure that this is clear. I call it the consolement, right? This is a word. And the consolement is like, okay, if somebody consoles someone, it's like they're nourishing them and they're making it feel all right for them. And so I was zooming into how the masculine side, which uses the mind to create things, does so in a way where it creates things to console it or to edify it. This is why people, they use their mind to create businesses, right? And that's this masculine side. It's like it's using the mind to create things that way that even become alive in the physical world. But the divine feminine side of us uses the womb to do that. And when you visualize that, what you're then seeing is an energy that expresses itself in a different way. And then it births something, and it looks at it, and it becomes just enamored by it. This is the true, unadulterated divine feminine. So it's just like looking into that baby's eyes, seeing all these baby rabbits, seeing all these trees, nature, seeing all these things that have been birthed from a womb. And that's how it's edifying itself. So if you see this now, imagine we're divine feminine, we're divine masculine in the same body. So imagine how powerful our creative forces are. Here's something that I really want you to zoom into today. It's just going to dial in the energy for this entire build. If you've never been on any kind of substance that takes your vibration into a higher rate, I'm going to explain just a one phenomenon to you. You can do this through breath. Some people have enlisted some of the trees to assist them, some barks to assist them. But when you get into that space, one thing you mainly notice is the amount of energy. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Like just the amount of energy that's coming through. Actually, in some journeys, like let's say, for instance, with the diamonds, the fuel is over the potential of what you need. You're almost flying by the seat of your pants, hoping to land. It's a lot of energy. So it's very interesting then that I like to see that space as a lot more real too, because you can see all the way through a person. You can see their bone structure. You can see little creatures hanging around. I mean, clearly that's more real than what's going on. So in this realer space, if you may, the energy is immense. So then why would we need to come here and act like there was a scarcity of the energy? Right? Like this is what I'm honing in on today, is that there's this thing that we got to struggle, and, there's only a little left, and, we got to fight for power, and we got to compete. Who's the smartest? And all of this going on. And it's like, but the real one, it's unhindered energy. So the only thing then that's going on is that there's some kind of artificial separation between us and the truth. Right? And then once you're not squandering for victuals from the table and crumbs, then you're able to see the magnificence of who you are. So this build today is designed to put you into that state perpetually, to center your being into this awareness of two powerful forces. As I mentioned, that in Western occultism, the numbers that are hidden are number 4 and number 7. And they're not only used more than anything else. Even the tetragrammaton is 4. There's 4 elements. It goes on and on and on, which are actually the same things. And then it goes into the 7 days of the week, the 7 candelabras, the 7 this, 7 that. But rarely do they actually tell you what these numbers actually mean, because then when you go into, let's say, something like numerology, or what we know is the original numerology, enealogy, we find that this entire system is missing from a Western occultism. Why? And I started digging into this, I believe, a week before when we were talking about reincarnation, and I was showing you several instances where the acts of reincarnation and the knowledge of reincarnation was even removed from the Bible and all other texts, because the emperors and the churches felt like this would begin to distract people. They would spend too much time on themselves rather than serving the state. They would be too concerned about where they were going next. And this was going to not put them in the condition to be mastered over in this reality. So they removed a lot of this reincarnation stuff. And then we synchronized in even a bit. I mentioned it then that the nodes, which is what Rahu and Ketu are, seem to be the major controlling points of when you're entering into another life. What is that experience going to be like? And we just talked lightly about how there's generally a shift in whatever you like to do now. If you come back again, you have a tendency to not like that at all. So that way you have a higher probability of going through a different experience. And then we also mentioned that this is not hocus pocus or mumbo jumbo, though. There's an actual force, a magnetic force even, that is responsible for shifting you into the opposite frequency of what you were in before. Now, the world goes through this. Governments go through this. You may even have this going on in your house. It's a pole shift. So this just happens like Sirius A and Sirius B. They go through pole shifts all the time. This happens when your neutral or arbitration component is not as let's say it's called it's arbitration, right? So it's not able to mediate between the two poles. We talked about that the referee is the mediator. That's why he's wearing black and white. He's hey, I can get in between you two and solve things between your disputes. So when pole shifts are happening, it's because the mediator no longer has the ability to actually balance out those poles. And so this mediation component and arbitration component in life is really important because we're already sitting here with the mind as a womb. Like they say, I think one of the songs says the womb of the mind is the woman. He just kind of rolled it all together. It's like the masculine mind, all is mind, Brahm, etc. And then the womb where it's creating and generating infinitely. Yeah. So since that's going on already, and this is what I'm going to explain to you here very deeply, because what we're dealing with constantly is you got one person that generally will say, well, no, it needs to come from the heart and from the womb, not from the mind. And then you got the mind people over there saying, man, they so stupid. They don't even see the power of this, the 32 paths and the Sephiroth and the artificial kingdom. You see what I mean? So you get this them versus them. And in fact, when I look over ancient scripture, I find always consistently that around 2,000 years ago, all the ancient books get X-Men comic book like upgrade where now it's this side versus that side. And if you've read as many books as I had about this, it's very interesting to watch and read knowledge before it starts to become dualistic, where there's a good and bad and it's interpreted that way. And then after, where there's one on one side and one on the other. And then obviously there's just going to be this good and then there's this evil and then there's this binary way of looking at life. But because we're not binary beings, we're just not. You're not in a binary vessel. You have a positive, I said, negative, neutral. So this means that if you're thinking binary, which is the good one, which is the bad one, you're not really in a position to really maximize all the levels of expansion that can be participated in here in this planetary system. You won't be able to perceive things the proper way. You'll be seeing them mainly through two eyes, right? But then that one eye, that mediator won't be there. See, the mediator also, like anytime this actually turns on and you really see what's going on, it's very difficult to come back into two eye and really take it that serious about what is actually going on and what is happening. Meaning that once you even just get a glimpse of the beyond, you already know what's there. So you can't really come back into this space on a consistent basis and just act like there's no beyond. It's like you just forget about it. Amnesia. You have no recollection of it. So that's why we consistently make those journeys and we make those trips. Again, that's in our meditation. It's in our breathing. And they've come up with thousands of ways for you to get on a high frequency. But it's very important to visit those spaces consistently. And also an ode to no pain, no gain. It's how this whole thing works. It's its version of our economy, except for that's why our economy is so messed up. A lot of people don't work a lot for what they receive. So that basically just unbalances everything. But the universe, it doesn't work like that. It ensures that if you put the work in, you're going to get some results. And now if we're in the artificial construct, you got people who don't put the work in and then they figure out later on, just like they erase the laws of the reincarnation. They figure out later on, like, damn, I'm broke. I get to the next life and now I don't have anything. How did this happen? Because you didn't actually build up anything in the life you were in previously that you can store up for a later time. They think that scripture's about Kemet when they're talking about that Joseph, or, you know, this is the wild story. They talk about Joseph went into Kemet, then the Pharaoh needed his knowledge. This just gets wilder and wilder. And then Joseph told him, build these silos and granaries because there's going to be these famines that start coming. And if you store up right now, while the whole land's going through famine, you're going to have food. All that is metaphysical. It's not about some person coming over and trying to tell Pharaoh what he needs to do. This is a direct reference to you as Nesut Bit, meaning the ruler of the upper kingdom and the lower kingdom. That's a bird and a snake, right? That you need to store up for a later time. And you're in this place right now where there's an abundance of things to actually store up. And then when you go into the next event, Club Afterlife, I call it, you'll be balling, as they would call it here, except for if you follow the rules that they give you here about balling. If you keep this up, they're already broke. They're already bankrupt. They're in debt. They're showing you what they are. This is another interesting thing about this system is like the wool is off. 2020 is over. Everybody should be able to see clearly. But if you're still putting, the wool over your own eye, and then you're seeing this 2021 and you don't see yourself going into the expansion, well, that's what we're here to change. And if you do see that already, that's what we're here to confirm. So as I'm just dialing in on the Rahu and Ketu, right away, I'm looking at anytime I get two of something, I have a system of two. And that's what I was saying about the blueprint, because when you have the blueprint, you could just go and grab the system of two, and then all this will file into place. So notice how Rahu and Ketu, in this case, this is number 4 and this is number 7, are, what is that? Draconis Kaput, which is the head of the dragon, and then Draconis, whatever the tail is. Okay? And right away, this starts clicking in with what I'm saying about how one aspect is the head, and we know Rahu is the head. It was Farbaru with the head cut off, which I'm going to explain the story here so that way nobody's lost on Vedic mythology, if you may. But I always see myth like a word like it doesn't exist. So Vedic wisdom, okay? So we have a being that's split into two, and it's split right at the neck. So we have a head and then we have a body. And to me, I can't actually give you any deeper explanation of the demarcation between where the wombs are in an androgynous body. One womb, the mouth. Boy, the mouth can get us. It said, man, the tongue is the most boisterous member of the body and can set the whole thing ablaze, right? Like the tongue is the reason that of the season these days. Like it gets you in and out of situations, right? So there's nothing like this. It cannot be ignored, this whole cave of wonders, right? And then we got the body, right? And the body in this womb that is here in this area, the Ur, right? Cooking up all the fire, all of that power and that force coming in, that obviously is clearly its own like creation station, right? I mean, it's probably how you got here. So all I'm sticking with here today is just facts, okay? Like we're not going to fly too far off, even though when we start getting it, it's going to be like, wow, but it is happening right now. It's not so disconnected where we can't connect it to what we're going through. So we got these two forces that we're equipped with. But this story here specifically about Svarbhanu, which is what later on became Rahu and Ketu, is actually a big key to how we get disconnected from this creator, this womb, and this creator. How people go through pole shifts and they're either down here or they're up here, and where masters are is they're in the center, right? So let's go through this. I'm just going to go through the legend of Sevan, and I'm going to spell that for you in the chat so you can check it out on your own time. You can check out not only Wikipedia entries, you can check out Vedic entries, because I'm going to give you the compressed version of the story. And then I'm going to get deeper into the story just from a direct metaphorical level on what's really being said, because I feel it's very instrumental to consistently slay duality, right? Like, I'm really here to keep things united in your consciousness so you don't short out. And it's very important to understand the story. So, because the story is the stories of cosmos, it's going to keep playing over and over again. When people really figure out what's going on, maybe they'll start looking over some of these recordings and they'll be like, yo, he already knew. So what else did he know? What else was he saying? Because this here is like, we used to, man, what was that called? The microfiche, I think it was called. It was like this big disc. They were the first CDs. They were about the size of records, though, right? They thought that was going to pop. They had them in the classrooms. And what this is like a big disc of lights, if you may. And now when I understand what exactly the cosmos is, I see it just as that there is a light code playing out in the sky. And because we're under it, we're constantly not just being influenced by it, but actually acting out what is going on in that space in real time. So until you know the story or the language, which is universal, I don't think they even plan on you leaving, to be honest. Like, I wish it was up to me, but the truth is that the key to the door, that's what they talk about, these words. You know, words are keys. They got mantras, tones, vibrations that unlock stuff. And so if you don't know how to unlock yourself, though, because you may be looking at you like you're going to go up to the top of the sky, go fly up there on a balloon and then open up the glass door. Cheer up, Charlie. It's not going to happen. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about going in here and actually intoning the proper vibrations to actually unlock your consciousness. Because a big part of this legend is about being free. And I'm going to keep unfolding it. So you have the link. Svarbanu is what I'm calling it today. Some of y'all that may speak Sanskrit back there like, must be South Indian. No, but listen, so a lot of us that are sitting on this path of 4 and 7 may have never asked the question, before the body was split into two, who was it anyway? And so, of course, the Vedic knowledge, man, this must have been all they had opportunity to do, because they have exhausted. Man, I don't think that any of these Star Wars, comic book, any of this stuff has anywhere near the level of the volumes of knowledge about the cosmos and how things are put together. This was their PlayStation, okay? So they had it all mapped out. And so you will always be able to keep going back and find the references. You even find out who he was, that was what's the name's child. And it'll just keep going back. But if you don't know what you're reading, and you don't know how to lose duality and decrypt the wisdom, that's how the knowledge protects itself. The wisdom protects itself because the profane, dualistic mind only sees a very base explanation. They immediately looking for the good guy. Oh, I'm going to be on his side. I'm going to jump in with Vishnu. I'm chilling with Vishnu on mine. See what I mean? Or they just jump over there with Brahm. Look, I'm with Brahm over here. And then, some root for the underdogs. Like, I'm with Maya. Me and Maya over here. And the Nagas, you see what I mean? So it's always a whose side am I on? Because we be trying to lens this stuff through like it's the 49ers versus the Chargers or something. It's like, what are we talking about here? This is a unified construct. And what happens is once you figure out how it all connects, it unlocks this deep knowledge and wisdom. So let's go with just what happened. How did Svarbanu get split into two? And I'm going to give this to you really fast. You can read the story if you want. It's all over the place. The story goes like this, the whole complete story, which is wild when you hear it. So at this point, this is now after the what I would call the rewriting of a lot of the Vedic texts. There's the Bloods now and the Crips. This is the Asuras and the Devas. So now they've actually now broke them into two. And this is very interesting because you will find several references to saying that the Asuras are actually benevolent. But in this case, since Varbhanu is an Asura and he's deemed as malevolent, it starts this dualism once again, that the Devas are the good ones and then the Asuras are the bad ones. And the ancient texts, they don't read out like, it's more deeper than that. You would have people in holy families doing stuff that was like Rakshas and then being demoted to that. So you just couldn't like one size fit all, every tribe and every clan and every form of life. It was a story to it. So in this case, they've now put this into blue versus red. And the story goes a little bit like this. They're looking for the creation of this elixir of mortality, the Amrita, right? And they console the higher gods. These are the devas. They console the higher gods, higher beings, whatever you want to call them, about how they can get this elixir created so that the way they can start enjoying this everlasting life on a continuous basis, dancing around with Mohini. So they get told that what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to churn the ocean waters to produce this foam that creates the sacred Amrita, right? So they go to it. And with all the powers of the devas, which seems to not be at any limitation according to the text, they're not capable of producing it. Somehow they're lacking something, and there's just not enough within their group to produce this everlasting elixir. So they go back again. Look, we're tired. We went and tried to turn it, and it's not working. So what do? Like, consult the crystal ball. And the high knowledge comes back and says, you're going to need to get the Asuras to help you. Now, right away, I find this to be so interesting because it really breaks through a lot of the spells of who you think each of these characters are, because some of these characters seems to have like infinite power, but they can't do everlasting life with that infinite power. It right away shows you the dependency and the necessity of utilizing forces together, even if it's in a yin-yang fashion. So in this case, what later on becomes the higher and the lower, the yin and the yang, or two forces then coming into combustion, is playing out on the field as devas and asuras. But see, the asuras at this point have somewhat of a reputation. They're kind of like a bit shady, according to these texts. They, get into worldly things, strippers, those kind of things, tantra out in the open, this kind of stuff. This is kind of how they label the asuras. And so they're like, well, surely we can't give them the Amrita because they're going to basically be getting crunk forever. And that's going to kind of kill like the harp playing and the music, but we need them. So let's concoct a way for us to get them to do this with us. In short, let's lie to them. Now, at this point, from my whole perspective, if I was still dualistic and maybe Catholic in a straitjacket, I wouldn't actually assume that the beings that were supposed to be good can lie. Just like I wouldn't assume that a being that can kill the firstborn of any nation is good. Just like I can't assume that anything that will want thousands of oxen burnt at an altar is good. Just like I can't assume that anything that will just want incessant worship and people bowing down in front of it is good. But somehow in this world that goes by as just without a hitch, and people are just like into that. Just lets you know where you're at. So the devas literally devise a plan to make the asuras work and churn with them under the context that they would get a chance to drink the Amrita too. And that's the only reason why they agreed to it. So the field is set. They're churning the waters in the oceans of life. Okay, there's something being said back here. Because of these two getting together, the waters in the oceans of life that produces the regenerative force starts coming out. And again, the story, which reads somewhat like a dream, says that the devas gather it up and dip. I mean, this kind of behavior, like leaving the asuras there, like, yo, what? And they go fly off into one of their high realms. Now, this kind of sounds like the elite right away. It's like, yo, we working down here. We good. Where's the stimulus? What the heck? We were supposed to get you in to invest back in us. What's happening? This is what the story is kind of playing out just as it is. I'm just saying it as it is. So they ride off into the higher heavens, and they're one of the guys then changed himself into the beautiful Mohini. They dancing and stuff. They pouring out Marita. It's about to get lit. And the sewers are down there clearly with no wings. They're not able to get up there. They've been cheated. And all this is going off without a hitch, except there is one much more smarter Asura who peeped it coming a long way away, who knew that the behavior of the devas from time to time happened to be shady, and that this could be another one of their coups, and disguised itself or himself as a deva. And when they rode off, he rode off too. That's Farbanu. And as they was in there with the Amarita, they done popped the bottles and everything. Mohini is dancing this around, passes it to Farbanu, who is an Asura. And he basically takes a drink. And he's right in the middle of taking the drink before, I believe it's Vishnu. It could be any character at this point. Takes a whip, a chakra actually, and whips it. And because Ketchum's like, yo, that's Farbanu. That's one of the Asuras. Wham! And in this process, beheads Farbanu. But because the elixir had already run through the mouth and into the body, the being had already became immortal. And that is the beginning of the story of Rahu and Ketu, which are also known as the nodes in occultism. These are what's also referred to as the nodes of the moon, because everything is under the moon. I don't care what planet you come from or what energy you're giving off. From the full moon to the new moon, that energy is going to change like a wave. So this energy affects everything. And that's why in occultism, in Western occultism specifically, they only work with the 4 and the 7. In the deeper sanctums, because they're not interested in learning Saturnalianism, Venusianism or Luciferianism, Mercurianism or Hermetics, solar. They're not interested in learning any of that. They're interested in how to control that. And when you understand polarities, that's how you control, that's how you arbitrate powerful forces. So that's what this energy is actually bringing forth, and this energy is about. And it's encrypted in the story of a terrestrial force, a daemon, if you may, given the immortality or the everlasting power of a god. And they roll it in a story like that because you're dealing with very powerful forces that are still in many tenses what you would consider as terrestrial. This is about the conscious plane, things popping off here on the planet that we're on right now. Your mind and your womb being the reason why everything is existing around you, right? So let's go a little bit deeper. So now that you understand the story of how we get to Rahu and Ketu, let's see here in the notes, because I actually want to pace this. I want to stay on target. I got to grab something real quick because there's a metaphor here that also needs to be very clear. Okay, so what this is it's a neodymium magnet, right? And it's shaped in a sphere. Now, if I take this magnet and I put it into a magnetic field so I can actually see I put it into a magnetic field visualizer so I can see the field, it will have the same torsion field around it as the human body. Okay? So technically right now, this magnet, when you talk about where the north and the south is defined, but is floating across the entire field. It's only if I break this do I get a defined north and a south pole. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that what we're literally talking about is when we have magnetic forces that were already together and then they get broke. If I break this right now, for most of y'all who have dealt with magnets, if I break this, they're not just going to snap back together. This is very important to understand because this is facts, right? This is real metaphysics. This, which is technically our electromagnetic field aura around us, is magnetic. And if this gets broken, I'm not just going to be able to get like one piece and then the other piece and they're just going to go and snap back together. That's not what's going to happen. They're actually going to repel. So when I try to put them back together, they're going to fight and they're going to not want to come together. That is exactly what is happening right now between all so-called poles, masculine, feminine. This is what this whole agenda on this plane is about, that we're all learning from. There's always an enemy, always something to fight. And then once that gets broken within you, like basically because the enemy is you, right? So once you have, they're describing this enemy that you need to hate and to be mad about. And then that happens to still be a part of you because you're everything. So I haven't said anything here that you shouldn't be agreeing with. You are everything. So when you identify something that you don't like externally and you decide to cut yourself off from it or isolate yourself from the understanding of it, you break it. And then when you break enough of them, you can't really reintegrate. It feels like that it's repelling you. And I've watched this with people. I've watched them personally self-destruct their lives by literally mentally creating the disaster that they're actually thinking about most of the time. I got a chance to see this in third party the other day. I won't name any names, but I saw one of our brothers or sisters, I won't just keep it very vague. One of our brothers and sisters having a little bit of challenge, wondering if they should still remain inside of the tribe. Wondering if it's still integral, wondering if it's still serving a purpose, wondering. And I saw them jump into a room that we were actually in the other day. In this room, it was crunk. We were in the clubhouse. My brother J-Ro got on. He was actually on first. He started the conversation about something to do with business credit, and this turned ultra metaphysical. But I noticed that, and it was a perfect segue because folks was jumping in there thinking they were going to get help on business credit. Next thing you know, they was going in. They had the Holy Ghost or something. It was wild in the room, okay? So it was a perfect segue for expansion. Then I saw our brother jump in the room right at the time that somebody got on talking just about credit. And not only was he talking about credit, he was kind of talking about somewhat of some shady stuff, right? So I can imagine for this person that walked in, they was like, damn, I knew it. There goes Sevan. Look, I thought he was about consciousness. He's sitting on the panel and they're talking about credit. That's all he's about. And then he left. And I just had to laugh. I was like, out of all the times, brother could have came in the room and just would seem like, yes, this is it. He's disintegrating it. We here now. That wasn't the time that he walked in. And it was another, because I'm always keeping a little file, right? It was another time where I've watched how our consciousness is manifesting everything that we think. And only the sticklers for detail are really also looking at how that's working with everybody else too, because sometimes they're mostly concerned about themselves. And I just take my notes and I watch how the mind works and how it works with timing and how it works with the field that's around us. Because it seems almost unbelievable. You think there's too many integers around you that are not able to be controlled. But somehow in timing, there's always a perfect moment and a perfect point for whatever you're resonating. And then when you come in and you smooth into the clock, then what you get is what you had given. And so this is why it's so important to not break your stuff. Because now you could really feel like, well, that's not me. And no, I'm not about that. And you could feel so confused about who you truly are because now the magnets are forcing they're against each other. That's why it becomes so difficult to unlock the power. The power literally unlocks when you become non-discriminate, when you stop judging. I watch judgmental stuff to stop judging these days. I'd be just like, man, and I know the minuscules of how one is judging. Let me remove that too. And then what that does is it allows all the energy to come together, right? But again, that's easier said than done for sure. So what I wanted to bring light to here is the power within these forces. So that way we understand that when this force is moving through our space or this force is identifying itself in our space, we understand the potential of what the mind and the womb is capable of doing since we all have one. We might as well learn how to use it. So the first thing I want to say is that in Vedic astrology, it appears that for thousands of years, they were able to calculate the positions of all of the stars accurately without any external instruments. Okay. Now, we also understand that the knowledge in which they were holding also came all the way from Kemet. There was a current moving all the way from the Nile Delta, which is basically in itself a vagina or a womb, all the way down through, all the way to ancient Lanka. All one tribe, from the upper worlds to the lower worlds, or from the realms of the Nagas to the realms of Brahm. Like that was an actual territory. Mount Meru, all this was actual physical, mental, spiritual planes. So the knowledge that's being passed through is actually a universal knowledge. It doesn't actually belong to anyone more so than it belongs to all of us. It is it is math. So math just states very directly that I don't care what skin suit you put on today or this lifetime, when I go to your grandmother, your grandmother's grandmother, we eventually gonna have the same grandmother until we're dealing with that original form, which we know is some type of androgynon being, does not look humanoid as you know humanoid today, but more of a composite, which is probably parthogenic, meaning that probably of a one-strand DNA persuasion, which gets us into more of like dark-skinned Naga, right? Like some type of melanated green, dark green womb, probably aquatic. So if, it's like when I'm trying to give out an APB, we're looking for a melanated, probably aquatic, one strand parthogenic, just cruising around the cosmos trying to find this being who is leaving all of these children and populating, pouring all these children out over the space. We're looking for you, APB, on the parents, where you at. This is more of what we're dealing with. And you would have to be, if you weren't engaged in the arts and the studies, you won't notice. But when you engage in the arts and studies, it becomes obvious. This is not stuff you have to, you got to go find some secret book that's chained down in the Vatican to figure out. Okay. So what I'm bringing up here is that, so when we see Rahu and Ketu pour over into Vedic in Vedic astrology, they don't identify them as planets. And this is very important because every other number in etiology is a planet, except for 4 and 7. It does not mention that they are planets. So because of that, when we look back into Western mysticism, because everything is a planet, you literally have to wonder, where is Rahu and Ketu in Western occultism? So we find out that Rahu and Ketu traits and characteristics are smeared across 3 planets in Western occultism. That is Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, which are 3 planets that are not recognized in Vedic astrology. It was not seen as significant enough for these Vedic astronomers when they were rolling all of the codes together to include these planets. Because how this works, even when they talk about the 4, the crown of the Magi, They're talking about Virgo. They're talking about the head of the ego, which is the Scorpion. They're talking about Leo. They're talking about Taurus. Okay. And in those four corners of the quadrant, everything else is basically inside of that in the cosmos. That's squaring the circle. Okay. So this means that it's no really use in mentioning some of the planets that's like right next door or whatever, because it's like, we already got everything with just mentioning these four. We're drawing out a quadrant here. So that's how this works, is that in Vedic astrology, they don't pull out other planets that are not more significant, that are less significant than other planets, because their goal is not to tell you which one is better than the other. Like it even plays out now, like one is more powerful than the other. That was not the goal. These are star charts to explain to you where you can go and where you may be going based on certain behavior and activities. So with that respect, they did not include Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune. However, when we look into Western astrology, which was definitely plagiarized from Eastern astrology for sure, we find that the traits of Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto are exactly that of Rahu and Ketu. Here's the example. Uranus is known for revolution, chaos, and sudden changes. That's Rahu. Neptune is known for spirituality, dreams, and imagination. That's also Rahu. Pluto is known for transformation, destruction, and regeneration. That is Ketu. This is verbatim from Jyotish numerology or Ennealogy or the Ennead. The planetary system energy of Rahu and Ketu are those exact correspondences. Revolution, chaos, sudden changes, spirituality, dreams, imagination, transformation, destruction, and regeneration. All comprised in this now a form that is split into two. So imagine, I'll keep going with these traits, because you're going to imagine if this thing comes together, you have access to everything. But when it's split apart, it's almost like you even have a ticking time bomb. Being in a Rahu trait or even in a Ketu trait can go left real fast in instabilities if they're not able to balance themselves. And this is the same thing with the mind, right? And the same thing with the womb. So let's keep going with this. So we find in Vedic astrology, modern Vedic astrology, and this is where I want you to start catching on to this, so you can find these demarcation points between the ancient, the original, and the modern. And don't play with yourself thinking that it's the same and that they kept it the same and that God would never let them touch the books and all of that you may go through. You're God. So if you let them touch the books, they touch the book. And if you're reading the book, now you didn't let them touch the book and give you the book, tell you the book is authentic, and now you reading the book as authentic. This is how that works. There's nothing stopping this. Again, that's why it was so important to make these fictitious external characters and not identify how they were inside of you, because then you would just expect, I don't know, some huge bird to show up and just peck the eyes out of all the evil ones and then leave you, to go about your peace and, I don't know, have all your electronic devices. Something weird. If you thought about the whole thing, you would find there was holes all in it. So you are the God, and a lot goes on here. And shoot, if you don't have the wisdom and the knowledge, and if you're not guided to actually have the discernment to be able to navigate your vessel here, you can get shipwrecked. There's shipwrecked folks. There's millions of them. I can show you them. Okay. So it just means that it can happen. So what we're getting at here is that in the modern Vedic astrology, Rahu then takes on this pretty dark character. And there's a reason for this, because there's a forked tongue kind of scenario happening. Rahu takes this dark character. Rahu basically becomes, in their text, the minister of the demons, the tormentor of the sun and the moon, because obviously Rahu is seen as what causes eclipse. In Vedic astrology, Rahu is the strongest of all of the energies in this Ennealogy pantheon after it gets the upgrade. Because they say anything that can eclipse the sun must be as powerful, at least, as the sun. But because Rahu is just ahead, the sun comes out of the neck. So they say basically that Rahu swallows the sun. I think there's one text that says the world trembles, Rahu eats the sun, right? This is the eclipse. And then Rahu eats the sun, but because he has no body, it comes right out of the neck, and then the sun shines again. During this time, there's a festival. Everybody makes noise to try to discourage the whole situation from happening. And this is how it rolls out every time that there's an eclipse and they're observing these holidays, now in which many of them do not know what was the original story. So again, we start getting this evil character in Rahu, which kind of lets you start seeing that, again, minister of demons, tormentor of the sun and moon, troublemaker. That's the mind. Listen to what they're really saying. Because if you're just caught up on the story, right, you're like, yo, who's going to come kill him? Who's my dad can beat your dad? Who's about to swoop down in here and beat Rahu up so the sun can come back alive? And you're just kind of going into like that. What's up with the Lakers, right? Like you're going in like that. You're not going to see. They're talking about the latter condition of the mind. The mind started becoming a minister of demons. What that just means is that you're listening to these negative thoughts and you're letting them convince you that they're right. The mind becomes the tormentor of the sun and the moon. The sun and the moon is inside of the body, two powerful forces that want to unite. And then there's the mind there just not allowing them to unite. And then there's the mind is for sure the troublemaker. Boy, it be just working on some folks. You can even see it. They don't have to be saying anything. It just be all in there like making trouble, talking crap about the next person around. And do you see how they look? Look what they got on today. I know she didn't look at you like that. Do you see her? She just thinks she hot. She always wear that same shirt, don't she? See what I mean? Just it's a troublemaker. Okay. So this is the mind. So we're going to keep going. So Rahu. So let's talk about the energy that is coming off of this path. Okay. So we just understand the mind's full scope here. Rahu, or mental energy, okay, is about change, invention, unbounded progress. Remember, the reason why they say unbounded, because the mind doesn't, it will try to achieve things that the body is nowhere up for doing sometimes and just drag the body along for the whole ride, right? Mind over matter. So unbounded progress. The internet, this is where it starts getting interesting, because we find that Rahu in Western mysticism is really the mascot of westernized civilizations and industries. Okay? This is because all of this to do with the internet, software industries, all electronic forms of trading, material desires, inspiration, originality, power, fame, success. This is all Rahu energy, okay? The force of a thief and the force of a policeman that stops the thief, okay? And this is what we should understand about these paths, is that these paths at times are completely contained. This is all the paths on genealogy. It's like you can either be the hero and the villain and in the same body, right? Because that's how the polarities are set up. So this is one of those examples. The Rahu energy is not only the criminal, but it's also the FBI, because you would need the same kind of mindset of the criminal, the aggression of the criminal, to actually be able to contain the criminal. So that's all contained in the same being. You don't have another being that just comes in and becomes the counterbalance or the enemy of another being. See how it's thrown off? So in the original text, it talks about how basically that all of these forces they have poles, and then they have their balance side. And when they're talking about one versus the other, they're talking about it versus itself. There was never really like, and then the moon comes in and fights Mars, and then they're on that side. It was never that. It was just maintaining who you are and keeping the balance within yourself and activating your powers and being responsible for what you're doing with your power. So let's keep going. So we have then this negative aspect of Rahu, which does exist in every path. It is there, but very specifically, it is poisons, poisonous chemicals, air pollution, intoxicants, an idea of the infinite in a finite, which I'm going to address later on in this conversation. Also, just to speak to Ketu, Ketu is the opposite of Rahu. Okay, so as we talked about before, this is a yin and yang force. The womb here and the womb here work with two opposing energies that generate each other. This is why this is going to be infinite. Think about this. This is the clarity in the whole build. The Amrita was an everlasting drink. And what was promised to those who consumed it was everlasting life. This started to sound like the Jesus story again. You drink of this cup, now it's all good from here, and you're going to be good. You're going to live forever. But that doesn't mean what kind of conditions you're going to live in. We didn't guarantee a check. You know, you're living in immortality broke. This could be a disaster. So it's literally saying that this is about immortality. So when you really, really drill into this, even if you lay in tonight, I want you to really hone in into the awareness that your mind and the womb of the divine feminine makes this never end. This is never going to be over. As long as someone is dreaming or thinking or uniting in holy union, there's always going to be somebody here. There's always going to be someone available to boot it up and start it again. They can heat this thing to 8,000 degrees Kelvin, burn it all up, and the mind will not be affected. It'll be sitting there watching the whole thing. And then likewise, the mind can just go to sleep, just done. Like, I'm out. I'm stupid now. That's like when the mind gets stupid, right? So it can't do anything. There will still be frolicking. There will still be a bunch of physical beings continuously being produced until everybody gets some damn sense and start realizing how to unite the forces and build the Jed again. So I'm just saying very specifically, these beings, whoever wrote these books, whoever made these accounts, they are not lying. It's facts. We live these facts every single day, but sometimes we don't see it exactly like this because we're always getting the dualistic perspective of what's really happening in these sacred scriptures. When really we should just look at what we're listening to inside with this knowledge and then put everything in play as we know with the blueprint and then dissect it from there. And then that allows you to have the power in the moment, to have the strength to do what you need to do at every moment. Remember, balance is, unfortunately, I can't tell you I will come in here tomorrow morning balanced. That is all about how I'm able to regulate things between tonight and when that moment comes. Balance will have every so-called master still trying to figure it out at every single moment, because it is not something that you can say, I'm done. I've reached balance. I no longer have anything to do. Every day there is going to be forces and energies that are going to move across the space like waves. And when you're sitting in the arbitrary component of yourself, that is the center, that is the seat of your consciousness, when you come out of the coccyx of your spine, we talked about before that even what would be the center of consciousness is sometimes tucked down deep in the curled tailbone of a person down there called the coccyx. That the consciousness has been thrown from the throne of its own self and scared down into the coccyx. So you would come out of that and you would come back into the throne of yourself and you would actually become the arbitrator. The whole purpose of a Kahin, which is a king and a queen, is to rule the kingdom. The kingdom is you. You have the upper and you have the lower kingdom. You don't do that from up here. You don't do that from down there. You do that from the center. I put up the Dynamo Jack Chinkong video so you can see it one more again so he can explain to you what is he doing. He's setting paper on fire. A lot of y'all want to do that, right? You want to go, that's a lot of meditation. Like you said, meditation every day. But some of y'all looking for these superhuman powers. They're there. And he gives you the key right then. He said meditation every day. And what I'm doing is I'm bringing the energy from up here And I'm bringing energy from down here and I'm putting it right here into the center of myself. That is a universal diagram. That's going to work for everything what he's talking about, because that is actually how power is really formed and really created. So this is also what keeps us on point with realizing where we're slipping from that. You see what I mean? It's like that's what we're here for. We're like a check and balance system with each other to just see where we're at. It's like a point to point system. So Ketu being opposite brings us into, again, transformation, destruction, regeneration. Now, the thing about Ketu and the power and the knowledge, because it's opposite to Rahu, it's like, okay, so what are we talking about? What we're talking about is the awareness of self, God, with no external stimulus. Okay, so let me give you a glimpse of what this is like. You have no memory. Let's imagine you have no memory. You don't know anybody around you, no language. You don't know. I could put you right in front of your husband, your wife, or somebody you love. You're like, who is that? Right? Like, let's say, you fall down, you bump your head. Now you don't remember anything. I bring your wife in front of you. You don't recognize her. I bring the kids. You don't recognize that. And you're just sitting there like, how would you come into an awareness of the supreme being in that state? It would be in an entirely different way. If you didn't have a story, I'm James Bomar, I did this and that and the other, I created this and I do this, and none of all of that, which gives you literally like just a reference point to the stimulus of your experience. And you did not have that as a faculty to actually learn through. How would you come to know about the supreme? Now they say, and I would agree, that to truly know the supreme is to remove all of that and then learn who you are. And that's what many go through when they go through that, like, just a fallout. Like they just lose everything. Everything's gone now. And then now you're forced to see who you truly are. And then you make it through all of that and you become this dynamic being, right? So what Ketu is symbolic to is imagining then a child inside the womb of its mother. It's actually in a space where transformation, destruction, and regeneration is taking place. Man, today I saw more than ever on the energetic side of things that time in which we're in the womb that we're calling 9 months, that ain't 9 months, Doc. You think it's 9 months about planetary 9 months. That's a whole life of awareness of who you truly are without language, stories. You get a little chatter from mom's belly, but it's like a muffle. It's just like some stimulus coming from the outside of the bubble. Who cares? It's Plato's cave. What's going on? I don't care what's going on out there. It's all about what's happening in here, but there's no language to comprehend that through, except for the original language. So in the state of Ketu, the highest state is to come into the awareness of divine self with no worldly stimulus. Now here's what's interesting, because I know some of y'all right away was like, that's what I'm going to do. That's who I'm going to be. I'm definitely going to get one of those things so I can wave it up there during the what do they call it? The stadium. I'm going to do the wave. I'm going to be on the Ketu side. And once again, there it is. You're trying to figure out how you're going to only use one force when two forces are in existence. And it seems so appealing, because that appealing is the magnets not wanting to come back together and then acting out as your decision that you're going to be either Rahu or you're going to be Ketu, and not being aware of how to do both, or when to do one and when to do the other. When to shut it all down and only allow what is pure and unadulterated to actually give you a description of who you truly are. It's so important and so powerful. It's so much more expansive than the defined construct. You can succeed here. You could be famous. You could do all of that. And there's power in that. But to unload that, I'm sure there's so many of these stars and actors like, man, I should have never got involved in this. I wish nobody even knew who I was. They seem to spot me anywhere. I saw one of my friends, he's done a few movies. He did the 300 or whatever. And man, I personally did not recognize him as much as everybody else did, because he had the hat on, he had the beard. And folks was coming up to him and like, yo, can we get a signed autograph? And man, I just was looking at him and I was like, man, to live vicariously through others, because I just saw that for sure he just wanted to like be left alone, and for sure he wasn't still getting paid for the movie anymore. So it was weird, because it was like they had gotten all of the money for this movie. I kind of saw this esoterically, that they had him star in this movie. They only gave him a small percentage for sure of what they made. These movies make like 400 or 500 million. Then they give the actor like 3 or 4 million, which is still a small percentage from the lead actor, being the lead actor doing all the work. And then when it's all over with, you still got all these people coming to you that see you as the person in the movie, and they want that. Like it was wild, because I was seeing they want to sign this for me and take a picture with me, and you just see them getting worn down, because these people are still collecting the energy that they were sold during the movie, and the producers and the directors and the investors, they've already moved on to the next star and actor. So they basically drain stars. They suck the power out of stars. They give a valuation of the star. He's worth 5 billion kilojoules of power. And then they create something with all of the cinematography and the phantasmagoria to harness as much of that power as they can. They got this stuff from still in India. There are gurus that their whole thing is to basically find people who have dharma and then basically spend up their dharma. So again, there's laws and there's rules to energetics. And even when a person says, well, I meditate, that doesn't necessarily make them the good person or the bad person, because it's like, well, what are you meditating on? So we always have to learn in our practices to go a bit further with what we're even being exposed to as far as knowledge, and saying, so let me hear a little bit more of that. Just because we say we do certain things, I pray, right? It's just like that becomes this, oh, he's holy, he's spiritual. And then it's like, well, that's not what they said. You can pray to other things. So we just have to learn, again, using that discernment, right? So in conclusion, with Ketu, the separation and the isolation from the elements and stimulus in order to know self, that's the womb. I know some of y'all was trying to figure out, especially even as males, since you don't have a womb incubator inside of your stomach right now, how does this all work for you? Are you only using your mind to create then? And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm telling you is that anytime you put yourself in a position of isolation and you get away from external stimulus and utilizing linguistic encoded structures to determine who the supreme is, you have placed yourself into the power of your womb. And what comes forth from that will give you consultation and will console you. But I'm also not saying that one of these is better than the other. I'm saying that they were forces designed to be in the same body and to operate for the benefit of the one who is inhabiting that space. So, in conclusion here, I also saw something that was rather interesting when reading a deep excerpt about Rahu. And it mentioned how in all of us, and this is what we've studied through enealogy, that we all complement each other in very unique ways. And there are paths that it's like that person, and you'll see them. Like if you just pay attention enough in your life and if you utilize these systems, because there's numbers all around you, then you notice that there's somebody that you vibe with. This always works. I love to do this for people who have not heard anything about enealogy, Because then when they start checking back with the numbers, it gets real spooky for them for a moment. Because they start figuring out everybody they liked was like the same numbers. And everybody they didn't like was like the same numbers. And they just start kind of flipping back over the whole thing. Like, am I really, this is all fake. Let me out. Ah! It's like falling with no ground. You know what I mean? It's just like, okay, come back. It is written. That's what they tell you. It's already laid out in the sky. But you do have a uniqueness. So I'm not going to say every probability. You have influences. You can be raised by a specific number, and that number can overwrite you. This is how a seer can look at you and see how what you say and how you move. It's even in lexicon. One say certain things. I'm about to get ahead. I really do like to be on top. I want to, and from the lexicon of their mouth, linguistic system, you already know what their number is, or at least the number that is influencing their lives the most. So in this case, it actually made to mention that for Rahu, it is very instrumental in all of the processes of creation that it links with the sun, or number one, right? And what I found interesting about that is that, but in the dualistic version of the text, it attempts to make number one and Rahu as off as if they're enemies, right? So I would say then to keep an eye out for that a lot of times what these texts are saying sometimes is the enemy is actually the one that, when you go to the deeper text, is the complementary component. And obviously your tutelage is to learn how to become harmonic with all forces. That's life goals, afterlife goals. You can still contain yourself in some type of personality to where, you know, what you prefer, what you don't prefer, but to blow out of this framework truly and to get beyond what can be learned here, you're going to need to tap into at least a trinary way of actually assessing what is going on around you. So these are the gems of the jewels of the awareness of exactly how Rahu and Ketu work as forces. It's even known that Ketu is more synonymous with moksha, which of course is one of the highest, if not the highest attainment that can be reached within this set of knowledge and awareness. This is to be set free or to be liberated. And now that we know exactly why that would happen if you were not using language to yourself, not using makeup to yourself, not using, meaning that you could arrive in a state of mind. I'm not saying you don't need this every day for yourself or don't use this every day or that it's the bad one. I'm just saying if you could release yourself from it, though, you could be free. And if you want to know what's binding you, it's sometimes just not having that floating point. Understand what I'm saying here. I'm saying that you go into the world, innovate, create things, right? But be able to shut it off. If there's anything that I've told you, be able to shut off all of that judgment through the words and who you're supposed to be and Earth's story and all of that, and be able to go into the womb where there was no language. You don't know what's going on out here. They always want to put that on the baby. She know exactly what's going on. The baby don't know what y'all doing. It's catching feelings and vibrations, but it still needs to learn how to interpret that. And people are going to then determine how the baby should interpret that and then project that on the baby. But while the baby's in the womb, it's not concerned about all of this. It's going into a higher genuflection with what it truly is. So have that floating point for yourself, because just like we set this infinite portal of awareness in the beginning, you have one already when you came into this thing, and the time and period you spent before then reflecting into self, right? So here's the last thing. Is Earth really finite? Okay, now listen to this. So I'm going in deep. Now I'm in Monotar at a certain point. Like I've gone all the way into the deepest mind of the earth, as far as inside of my consciousness through this Rahu and Ketu portal, and just seeing how it all unfolds, just watching how it all unfolds. And then when I get all the way into, you know, the deepest levels of the awareness, something just says, do you think Earth is really finite?
And it took me to this one time where I was listening to this guy, right? And this was one of those people that they had clearly figured out the whole magic thing, but they were for sure using it to manipulate everything going on around them. So they, in many ways, you felt that they couldn't be trusted. But I was gleaming off the whole thing because I realized that they obviously unlocked something, though. And if it was some form of truth, maybe it could be gleamed. And what I heard the person mention is about how, as a real manifester, what you really know is that actually every single thing that you could want can be called up with enough power. It wouldn't matter if it was on earth. It would come from what he said was somewhere else and then just appear here. So he was talking about how the block in a lot of people's manifestation is an awareness of something being finite. Like if they had all the money in the world, then all the money would be gone from everybody else. What he was proving, though, is that that's not how it works. If you could manifest all the money in the world, you would have all the money in the world, and then the world would still have all of its money too. If you wanted all the gold in the world, so I'm giving it to you in a very materialistic way, but of course this works on a much more spiritually expanded way, that in the nutshell, earth is not finite. That's another illusionary lie. We're thinking that we're wearing out earth's resources. Let me show you how all this really makes all of the sense. Do we think that earth is not capable of having the same level of power and ability that we have? I'm going to say that again. Here we are. We're just now cracking into the secret. We're just now figuring out what you say does do something. We're just now figuring out we have this womb and it can create things. And we've been creating stuff, even some Frankensteins. But this thing's been knowing all of that. And it's been knowing all that for billions of years. It is sentient. And because what we're taught and what we're shown, and we really have even examples of, is that actually we have infinite potential. Do we somehow believe that Earth doesn't have infinite potential? And then all of a sudden that everything's just going to run out on Earth? So that's what I'm at. That's where I'm at these days. I'm checking base. I'm coming back over these things that we've accepted in our mind to look one more time and see, does that really make sense? I mean, from a logical level. I'm not going to go into occultism. I'm just going to take this on a logical level. Does it make sense that beings that we know are infinite, that can perform different levels of magic even, and still in training, on training wheels, in diapers, basically, compared to what can really be done in the cosmos? And then you have Earth as a being containing all those forms, even forms we haven't even seen. Like I said, big brain cephalopods hanging out in the bottom of the ocean, chilling, projecting entire storm and weather systems, like all sorts of stuff going on. And somehow we're thinking Earth is finite and going to run out of resources. We're going to run out before Earth runs out. So I would say still that for sure, I'm not talking about not being mindful. When you throw something away, it goes somewhere. Recycle, leave a less of a footprint on Earth. Tread lightly here for real. And it's just because we roll light. Like there's no reason in being like slag. You know, one of the guys from the Power, what did they do? The dude with the 5 rings, the Captain Planet, Greedo or whatever his name was. You're just driving around in a big, F950 with a smoker out the back, you know what I mean? It's just like, that's just not mindful. That's going to create its own level of ignorance. But also don't play Earth thinking that Earth is some finite experience and hasn't already tapped into the infinite potential of creating realm upon realm upon realm. They said, behold, when we saw all the realms, it made us swoon. Meaning that, you know how when you look at, like if you're on something high and you have this thing where you're scared of heights and you look down and it makes your stomach feel weird and your legs go weak. That's swooning. So the masters were saying when they got a chance to see how infinite this really was, it made them feel like that because of how vast it is. And this whole idea of scarcity and that it's running out and that we're destroying it. This is a womb is very strong. A woman will let you know that. And it is more than calibrated for the experiences that we're going through. So much so they decided to put 2 of them in here. So I want to say to everyone, remember your power. Stop letting your forces come into conflict and be used as conflict and getting all fused up. Remember, it's difficult to put the thing back together, especially some people have some racism issues and it's constantly stoked for them by the reality. This is the game they love to play. Because if they can keep it separate, remember, it's not even about who you're seeing externally. It's what's happening in the inside. You're taking that string of memory and DNA and you're disconnecting it. And I'm telling you, as an engineer, we can build the most complex device. And I'm telling you, man, just one little point on the soldering board not being put together, one little fuse missing. You know, the car outside, the car does all this complex stuff. One fuse. I go in the box, I pull one fuse, the whole thing's not working. So I always say, straight and narrow is the way. That's the arbitrator. On one side, there is fire. On the other side, there's deep water. Now, do you get it? Rahu, fire, the mind, fire in the mind, deep water, the womb, the amniotic fluids. Straight and narrow is the way. This means that you can literally be like on that balance and be able to benefit from the steam of 2 rather powerful forces that they're always going to exist. They already drunk the Amarita. So this thing's it's gonna keep going and you could keep going with it. But knowing how to navigate yourself, to have that 4 and that 7 as your rudder in life. So again, this is taking it out of the scope that we're just talking about a number 4 and a number 7 and bringing it into the scope that we're talking about the power that regulates your polarities. And this is how you're able to be able to continuously lock the keys to yourself. So everybody knows that when I come into the space, I only look to give you everything that you need right now. If you decide to cancel your membership, you got the jewels. If not, type into YouTube. It's there for you. We're here. We're doing this in integrity, meaning that there's no agenda. There's no motivation, motives. We're moving on the sails that are pushing us through the currents of life, and it is good. And eventually we'll see everything. So there's no rush. If you come into the space, I know there was a couple questions. We're not going to get to those questions today because I really would like this to just bake in, because this is the key to a big aspect of our creative forces, which I know in this 2021 need to be in effect. Like, this is the year of transformation. The powers and the energies are right there. The forces are real. This is not the hocus pocus and I'm going to play with you and all this kind of stuff and tell you some things that's not really going to happen. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about that there's the final separation between you and the things that you think are counterproductive for you, or that you're separate then, and you need to get that worked out. I'm not telling you need to go and be everything as friend. I'm not telling you any of that. I'm saying listen to this knowledge. Grasp this wisdom. Apply it to yourself and see the supreme that you are. Go forth, manifest, create, imbalance, and realize the things that you're doing actually do have way more power than you think. And you can do things here right now, which should be your whole objective, especially some people that are at home right now. The job is still paying you, but you don't got to work, or work is hard. All this is like a Sabbath There's a silver lining to everything that's taken place. It's to give you the opportunity. They're painting this like, it's the pandemic and all this stuff. There was a decree from on high, Sabbath. The people need a rest. They need time for themselves and to regenerate. That's what all this is about. But some folks, that's not what they're doing. If you read the signs and read the times and you really understand what's going on, like this is the grace is what they call this. And so soak it up. Soak up yourself. Get yourself on another level. So I just want to say wholeness and balance vibrations. I have a hard time saying goodbye, but I'm going to honor what I said about this being an hour and a half because we're about at that point, a little bit hour and 40 minutes. We're going to open this thing up for a wholeness. We have a lot coming. We actually met this week. Me, the team, we have some new tribe members that are very powerful in getting things organized. We're rolling with soul coaching, and that's beautiful to finally see the manifestations of that. Me and my brother Andrew have linked up. Lots and lots of power coming forward, doing stuff with not only yoga, etiology, connecting the planets and yourself, putting the physical aspects of things back in line. So important, right? Because you could become mega mind, like your brain could become so big it just explode on camera. But truly, you got to also put the work in this lower half, right? So in this next 2 months, we're going to really be digging deep into the lower half of how the body needs to work in conjunction with the mind, the soul, the spirit in order to achieve what it needs to achieve. Again, I wanted to give thanks for all those that joined today. It's always immense for me to be able to see so many come into the space. I always look at the faces of those who are riding out. I think it's about 161 of us here. So I know some came in late, so I will have this archive up for you to be able to check out. We'll be coming in. We'll be able to send the schedule for next week. And we're continuously moving through this. I just want to let you know that you have allies. That's the beings that you see around you that have come into full spectrum balance. Enjoy what is available. We did an orientation recently, and I was just like, wow, we have a lot of stuff, but we don't want that to be in a way where you don't know what to do. So easily get with one of the pillars and ask if you need, send something to support as a ticket. Hey, this is what I'm experiencing. Where should I start? And we'll be able to assist you with navigating the materials and the applications that we've made available. Wholeness.
Wholeness, family.
Wholeness,
Family.
Family, happy to be here. Everybody.
Family. Sending love. Sending love to the family. We love we. Let's keep building.
We love we.
Keep growing.
We love we.
Arbitrating that balance from the center. Realizing the power of the mindfulness and the meditations. Staying in alignment and true to self. Realizing that we're immortal beings. This is going to continue. There's a party going on in Club Afterlife. It's happening right now. You will get there. There is no rush. Stay on the sea of life. Navigate your life and your waves of experience through the awareness and the knowledge in which you've been given by your ancestors. Cherish yourself. Love yourself is the same as loving your ancestors. Keep your DNA strong. Keep connecting the chain. See the beautiful faces around you. Inspire them. Realize that it's always great to give. Better to give than receive, because you have the force to keep pushing things forward that triggers the reaction of things coming back to you. Respect your wombs. Watch what comes out of your mouth and what goes into your body. Realize the sacredness within self. It's an infinite will. We give thanks.
We give thanks.
Wholeness.
Brother. Give thanks.
We give thanks, family.
Wholeness fam.
We give thanks.
Oh, Ashe.
Love we,
Gracias, Kamati. Oh, what the hell?